Okay, Meg, I think we can get started. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Noor Kokiar, the Executive Director of the Washington State China Relations Council. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's event, which is jointly produced with the US China Business Council. When talking about US trade with China, the media and government officials usually talk about the fortunes of large US multinational companies. However, there are many small and medium American companies with operations in China or who source most of their product from China, and we rarely hear their stories. These companies are subject to the same issues that bedevil the large corporations, such as a worsening US-China political relationship, tariffs, COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions, and supply chain issues. Today, we have three panelists with extensive experience either running their own small and medium business in China or with assisting SMEs to maximize their business with China, who will share with us their experiences and observations about how small and medium industries are managing in today's difficult environment. We've also asked the panelists to comment on whether government programs, assistance programs in particular, are beneficial to their operations and potential areas for improvement. Our moderator today is Elizabeth Rowland, who will introduce us to the US China Business Council. But before I relinquish the mic, let me say a few words about the Washington State China Relations Council. The council was founded in 1979 after Deng Xiaoping visited Seattle. We have the honor of being the oldest state-level organization dedicated to improving the bilateral relationship between the US and China. Today, we produce educational programs, facilitate communication between government agencies and private enterprises in their interactions with China, and we provide information and analysis about China to our elected representatives. And now, before I pass the mic, let me note that WSCRC's next webinar will be next week, actually on May 4th, when we're going to interview two Washington natives, both now living in Shanghai, and they're going to recount to us what life is like under lockdown. So please go ahead and take a look at our website for more details about that event. And now I'm pleased to introduce Elizabeth Rowland of USCBC, who will proceed from here.
Thanks so much, Noor, for kicking off the event. I am the Director of Subnational Initiatives at US China Business Council, and USCBC and WSCRC are really sort of sister organizations. We were both founded pretty early on in USCBC's case, 1973. USCBC is a private, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of over 260 American companies that do business with China. We provide information, advisory, advocacy, and program services to our member companies of all sizes, and through our offices in Washington, D.C., Beijing, and Shanghai. Our mission is to expand the US-China commercial relationship to the benefit of our membership and more broadly, the US economy. In 2021, last year, USCBC launched 50 States, 50 Stories, which is a new subnational initiative that I now lead, dedicated to small and medium-sized enterprises and state-level US-China trade. Our goal is to uplift the voices of local communities and SMEs like those on our panel today in order to make sure that the broader public, as well as government policymakers, know what a crucial place that trade with China plays in their local businesses and local economies. We do this through stories published on our 50 States, 50 Stories webpage, as well as events just like this one that we host with local partners across the country. So I'm so glad that WSCRC was interested in partnering with us on this event, and I'm really excited to meet and learn from these experienced entrepreneurs that we have as panelists today. So let's dive right in. I think Noor has something to say, but
yes, Elizabeth, I apologize. You know, I didn't introduce you very well, so let me do that so that our participants know a little bit about your background. Elizabeth is actually very well suited for today's seminar because she actually ran a small and medium enterprise in China. She moved to China in 2007 where she started her own online jewelry company sourcing from China. So she understands the issues. I'll mention that while she was in China, she also worked for the American Chamber of Commerce there, AmCham China, as a policy analyst and an editor for the Chamber's American Business in China white paper. She also worked for the law firm of Covington and Burling as a senior manager of policy analysis. And after her 5 years in China, Elizabeth returned to Knoxville, which is her hometown, and founded the TN China Network, which was a nonprofit to promote trade and investment between Tennessee and China. And she served as a director from 2014 until she stepped down from that role in 2020 to run for the Tennessee State House. So as I mentioned, she has lots of experience in this area, and we're really pleased today. And I apologize for not introducing you earlier. So back to you.
Thank you. No problem at all. Appreciate the nice introduction. So we are going to plug in to the chat box the panelist bios. We have limited time, so we want to make sure you probably have read them all already anyway, because they are on the event announcement. We want to let the panelists speak for themselves and dive right into the content rather than me read all of their bios. So you can see the bios in the box if you'd like to refer to them again. So we are going to, after the panelists give their brief self-introductions, I'll follow up with some moderated questions. And in their self-introductions, they'll especially highlight what their experience is that's most relevant for this conversation. So what kind of business they're doing with China. At any time, you're welcome to pop your questions into the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them. Please include your name and your company or your organization if you have one, so that our panelists can know who you are, where you're from. And I also wanted to say that this event is being recorded. We will be posting it on our websites after the event, so that others can refer to it later if they missed it. So first, let's kick things off here with Jean DeMunt. She is co-founder of Seattle-based Echo Products. Jean, if you could please give us your little self-introduction.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. I first went to China in 1980, taught English, and since then have spent my entire career involved with China business. I've worked for Chinese government, trading companies in New York, US-based import companies on both coasts. I've worked for the state of Washington, the China Relations Council, the USCBC before it was the USCBC, and now I have a small business in the power sports industry that imports about half of our products from China.
Great, thanks for that intro. What a great diverse background you have. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris May, co-founder of Shanghai Faiyi Industries and a native of Portland, Oregon, though now he is based in Shanghai and is currently under COVID lockdown. So we are thinking of you, Chris, as you deal with that, and we look forward to hearing about your experience. Please give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much for the well wishes, Elizabeth. Yeah, my name is Chris. Obviously, I was born in Portland, Oregon, and I moved over to China in 2015. Since then, I've worked in large Chinese conglomerate groups over in Suzhou, as well as larger US-based entities here in Shanghai, as well as in import-export. During my experiences here. In the recent, basically 2.5 years, helped co-found a factory plus trading company called Shanghai Faiyi Industry. We mainly help source products for larger distributors such as Walmart, Metro, Dollar General. We also have a bevy of small, medium enterprise sort of clients, SMEs there, which we help with sourcing in China as well.
Excellent. Thank you. You have a lot of interesting on-the-ground experience to share with us. Now, Stanley Chow, president of All In Consulting, based in Southern California. Stanley, please take it away.
Hey, thank you. I'm Stanley. I lived and worked in China and Hong Kong for 25 years, working for such companies as Philips Electronics, Merrill Lynch, SoftBank, and Kingston Technology. In 2000, I started my own consulting firm, helping foreign companies, mainly SMBs, do business in China, both selling into and outsourcing. And we've done well over 120 or so projects over the past 20 years. Mostly handle industrial products, B2B. The vertical markets we handle are aviation, automotive, consumer electronics, manufacturing, oil and gas, B2B software, mining, and green tech. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm based in Los Angeles. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Well, you have a really broad look at things, so that'll be really helpful in this conversation. Since we're on you right now, I'd like to pass you the first question. So a lot of news about the US-China relationship right now is pretty negative. There's a lot of doom and gloom, and yet many large American companies with a presence in China report that business is quite good, actually. What are you hearing from your clients and the companies that you're exposed to, how it's going for small and medium-sized enterprises in China? Yeah. Are they generally profitable? And what about the SMEs that source products from China that you work with?
Yeah, I tell you, business is still booming. I mean, if you look at 2021, foreign direct investments into China were, I think, well over $300 billion, which I think is a new record. I'm still getting phone calls for people wanting to go to China, whether it's selling to, setting up manufacturing, or outsourcing. I know about 100 companies in China. None of them have told me that they are planning to relocate out of China. None of them are coming back to the US. Some are looking at this China plus one option, but nobody is leaving because the market is so big in China. SMBs are still doing very well. Let me give you an idea. Pre-COVID, pre-President Trump, out of every 10 companies I worked with, 3 would kind of fall out in the beginning when we did the market study. Their products weren't right. Out of the 7 remaining, 5 would do very well over the course of 5 years, and 2 might falter during those 5 years. Those numbers haven't changed even today, even with the governments disparaging each other. So the market is still very good in China for SMBs and for multinationals.
Very interesting. Chris, are you feeling and hearing the same thing on the ground out there?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what Stanley has said. And I think a major portion of that is, you already have the major infrastructure as well as, the range of expertise here in China, comparatively to, other countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Southeast Asia. You have a larger, I guess, working body of, more middle, higher end manufacturing capabilities here in China, especially in regards to, die casting, tooling, molding, these sort of, important integral parts of manufacturing. So, when you have the environment like that, it's obviously conducive to still do business and source here in China versus other countries. Yeah.
Thanks. Jean, I understand for you, tariffs have been a challenge. How is that impacting your company's ability to do business with China right now?
Well, right now, actually, we are okay. The products that I'm importing have not been hit with big tariff increases, but we don't know how long that's going to last. And in the past, I've had the situation where a container will leave Shanghai and the tariffs will be raised while the container is on the water, just really messing up my price structure. And we're careful to make sure we have margins that can accommodate those kind of shocks when they happen.
Have those margins changed throughout the past couple of years?
Yeah, they've a little bit, but we're looking this year at doing some price increases, which we haven't had to do up until this time.
Mm-hmm. So would you consider your company sort of starting to adjust to a new normal of the tariffs, or what is your sense there?
Well, I think it's, the thing that's really hitting us now is not so much tariffs as shipping rates. I've really postponed ordering because of the shipping rates. I'm hoping that that's a temporary situation and that the prices will come back down into something that's closer to normal, what used to be normal, and that this is not the new normal, because that really will impact my business. And I'd be interested to know what my fellow panelists are seeing in that regard.
Yeah, Chris, Stanley, what are your thoughts on the tariffs and some of these supply chain snarls and shipping costs going up?
Yeah, regarding the tariffs, what I'm seeing from my customer base, there's been this argument about who's paying for tariffs. I'm seeing the Chinese suppliers, they can take about 20 to 40% of the cost for the tariffs, but the American companies, the importers, are taking about 60 to 80% of the brunt of the tariffs. So American companies are, I feel, are suffering, especially SMBs. The multinationals have holding power. So there's a lot of pressure right now on SMBs to lower costs or to pass it on. And I'm also seeing a lot of pressure on the folks in the White House, where small companies are pressuring the White House to back off on the tariffs because we have inflation so high right now. So hopefully, I think we're going to see those tariffs maybe come off in the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, and just to add on to all the talk about the tariffs, basically, in my experience, working with both larger and then smaller importers, it's been a really renewed focus on basically landed cost pricing when we're working with our clients. So for example, being able to kind of help our clients with a lot of the pricing on their products by, improving packaging. Jean mentioned the increasing logistics costs. So there's been a large focus on us to kind of help with packaging requirements. Maybe before in a 40 high cube or in a 40 GP, you could put maybe, let's say, for example, you could put like 500 products into there. There's a renewed focus on, how can we improve the packaging so that instead of 500 products, maybe we can fit about 600 to 750 products. On top of that, I think there's been more innovation on the China side about actual manufacturing. So for example, beforehand, maybe you had a mold that was only doing single shot to, single product. You're looking at the more increased labor costs on that end. Obviously the increased raw material costs on that end. And then, so what they're looking at is, well, what if we put in the direct investment into building a new mold, making it into a one shot coming out with 2 products, one shot coming out with 4, 8, something like that, that increases your productivity from the manufacturing side, and then, reduces labor costs. So I think the tariffs have kind of forced a lot of the Chinese manufacturers to take a lot more of a holistic approach to, where can we cut costs along that line. But, as Stanley said, I would completely agree with him that even when you go into all those sort of cost cutting or, you know, improvements on your packaging that can maybe affect, you know, 20% to 30% of the pricing on those tariffs. And then the other 60 to 70% is going to be bore by the importers. And then I think on that end, again, passed down to the end consumer. So.
Well, it sounds like at least maybe an unintentional benefit is that we might end up with a little bit less waste and smaller packaging going forward. So that could be, you know, some kind of silver lining out of the situation. So it seems like there's a barrage of various different challenges that are hitting companies all at the same time. The tariffs, the supply chain, and then there's also COVID-19. I'd like to hear how COVID-19 is impacting your all's businesses. Chris, why don't you go first since you're in Shanghai?
Yeah, no, COVID has definitely been a bit of a double-edged sword, I'd say, for us, the zero COVID policy over the last couple of years. Right now, obviously, offices and our manufacturing have been shut down. Manufacturing was shut down for a period of time, but now we're into closed loop manufacturing. So basically, we have.
Can you describe that for some people that might not know about that?
Yeah, so basically the government is allowing manufacturers to stay open during all of these COVID lockdowns, basically by, you know, keeping essential factory workers within the actual factory on that side. So, you know, they have very limited movement, basically going from the factory to perhaps like a dorm or something like that, or, you know, in extreme cases, even staying within the factories during the entire period of time, just to keep the manufacturing, you know, keep operations running on that end. So that's where we've been kind of at on that side. As far as supply chain crises, obviously there's been a lot of delays with some of our suppliers as well, basically providing products to us and getting them abroad. I mean, we've had a lot of cancellations of sailing dates within the past 2 years. And I think that's kind of caused our end clients to be a bit more risk averse as far as kind of building that into timelines. So for example, we've seen a lot of our clients basically pushing up their timelines. You know, originally maybe they were looking at you know, Q2, Q3, kind of, you know, doing all the sourcing, getting all the pricing, doing virtual buy tours and everything like that. These are kind of getting moved up into Q1 instead, just to build in any sort of delays that can happen on that end. You know, last year as well, you saw a lot of increased demand from companies abroad too, just so that they were keeping warehousing. Basically keeping extra products on hand versus, you know, the traditional logistics and manufacturing of like just-in-time sort of ideals. So I think, you know, for us on our end, we've seen a lot of basically just adding in more risk aversion.
Jean, what are some other techniques your company is using to adjust to some of these supply chain and other issues?
Well, we've never been a just-in-time kind of business. Business is very seasonal, with a big ramp up that starts in the early spring and then tapering towards the end of summer and fall. And if we miss the season, it's really a disaster. So we have traditionally held very deep inventory, and, you know, in order to get the best pricing and to have product on hand when our customers need it. And I'm an importer and a distributor, and I sell directly to retail establishments, retail motorcycle shops for the most part. So when they want the product, they want it right then for customers who are coming into their store. So deep inventory it's interesting to hear that other people are going to deeper inventory practices, because that's really always been something that we've believed in, because the person who has the product when the customer wants it will get the deal. So, you know, and I just regret that over the last few years, COVID has prevented me from going back and visiting, you know, my suppliers, because I like to maintain those relationships in person. So I miss that in-person contact.
Yeah, definitely. So you haven't done the 2-week quarantine adventure yet?
No way, no way.
Yeah. Stanley, what about you? Are there any tricks of the trade that you've found your clients working on to navigate all of this?
Yeah, before COVID, most of the buyers, most of the importers were working with their main supplier, their tier 1 supplier, kind of the OEM who would buy everything and put the parts together. Now we're going beyond that. We're asking the tier 1 supplier, who are your sub suppliers? We want to meet them. We want to know who are the suppliers that will have the bottlenecks. And we will reach out to them and actually buy the components ahead of time and store it at the OEM. So that's the major difference. Instead of just working with the OEM, we want to know who those second and third tier suppliers are, hopefully see them in the future. And when things start to get short on products, we'll go ahead and start ordering months ahead directly from the tier 2 to ship to our OEM.
Interesting. To shift gears a little bit, from the supply chain and other challenges, you know, there's one other big challenge, obviously geopolitics, that often gets in the way of commerce. How is the worsening, or has the worsening US-China political relationship impacted the way that you all do business with China? You know, Stanley mentioned China +1 strategy, where manufacturers might source a large part of their goods through China, but then have another country as sort of a safety valve option. Do you see a lot of SMEs following this strategy, or is it too costly for them? Do your companies have plans, or your clients have plans for contingency strategies if the US-China relationship continues to get worse?
You want me to take this?
Sure. Why don't you go, and then we'll go to Jean.
Okay. We've really hit a inflection point now, particularly with the things going on in Russia and the Ukraine war. Companies are really now thinking about China +1. Companies before did it, but it was more the easy stuff. Basic plastic injection products, textiles, furniture. You're now getting the companies that make complicated things, refrigerators, microwave ovens, computers, that are looking for other places to make it. And they're doing it for 2 reasons. One, because they don't want all their eggs in one basket in China because of all the supply problems. 2 is they're worried that China may not be a good place to import products anymore, to export out of China. Janet Yellen said in a speech a few weeks ago that US companies have to begin doing friend-shoring, meaning make stuff in allied countries, be it Mexico or Canada. And that, to me, signals that maybe China and the US in terms of geopolitics are heading maybe towards a bifurcated economy. So you want to stay in China for China, but you need to look +1 for that friendshoring. With that said, though, it's extremely difficult. I'm working now with a refrigerator company. We've been trying this for years to go to Mexico, but the refrigerator company has about 60 suppliers. We can get maybe 20% of that in Mexico. The other 80% still has to come from China to Mexico, and then we assemble everything together. We can never get 100% from Mexico. So it is costly, and it is an extra burden, but it has to be done for both supply chain reasons and for this so-called friendshoring that seems to be taking shape.
Great, thank you. Jean, for a company like yours, for products like you import, is friendshoring an option, or is China really the main place to get the products you need made?
Well, my products are not terribly complicated. They're primarily plastic injection molded, with some quality. They're face shields that have to be safe and clear, which requires a certain level of molds, but it's not a product that couldn't be manufactured somewhere else. The cost of making new molds somewhere else is daunting to a very small company like ours. If I were in a different phase of business and life, as opposed to where I am now, which is in my 60s, I might be thinking more about China +1, but at this point, we're committed to China. We have great relationships. Things may get a bit more costly, but I don't see us leaving China or diversifying at this point.
Do you have any concerns about the relationship, US-China relationship, deteriorating further in the sense of how it might impact your business?
Well, I think the relationship is very likely to deteriorate further, and it saddens me after a lifetime of working between the US and China. And to some extent, I feel like I want to maintain my teeny tiny little part of that relationship. So, I'm hoping that being an importer from China, being a customer of China, will be welcome no matter what the politics are. And we've had bumpy politics in the past, after Tiananmen and anti-bourgeois movements in the 90s. And, I think the intertwining of the economies is such that, at least for my business lifetime, it will continue.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I like to hear that commitment and optimism. And I similarly feel saddened by the situation going on. Chris, what would you like to add on this? Your company is headquartered in China, and how does that feel as an American living there, trying to navigate these uncertain times in the US-China relationship?
Obviously, I think geopolitics always are kind of in the back of our minds, but I think there's some major major kind of forks in the road there. As Stanley said, you do see larger companies able to, put in this foreign direct investment to, Mexico or to Southeast Asia. I think that's definitely a bit more prohibitive for some of our SME clients. just basically the cost of tooling, all that, all the component parts that you need. It's difficult to get them in these other Southeast Asia or Central American countries. Even at that point, the tooling and mold design, all that sort of stuff is still being done. Quite a bit of it is still being done in China, just because cost-wise it's cheaper. Plus, as far as the timeline for building one of these products, it's much faster here in China versus everywhere else in the world. So I think for SMEs, it's still advantageous to, looking at China as a sourcing, as an area to source from, just because of, the infrastructure that's already there. It's going to be much easier for you to implement your products, get all the raw materials that you need for it. But, again, you do see companies looking into, risk aversion. And I think that's, not just the geopolitics side of it. I think it's just COVID as well. You can't have, as Stanley said, you can't have all your eggs in one basket. And I think a lot of companies abroad are kind of figuring that out.
We have a question that I'd like to turn to from the audience. Michelle Yuan and Owen Hack from China Virtual Assistant. And their question is regarding localization. Against the backdrop of the gradual reopening of China and lowering bottleneck costs, do you see a huge long-term demand for US SMEs for hiring local associates on the ground in China? Has that demand changed at all through the COVID period and as hopefully China starts to open back up? Would anyone like to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can provide a little bit of insight being on the ground here. I think for SMEs, it's now very, very important that you have, some sort of expertise in the China market. People that are able to kind of guide you through the process. Obviously, having someone on the ground always helps. They're much more attuned, as well as, it's always faster for them to kind of react to any sort of the situations happening in China currently. And as we've seen over the past couple of years, situations can change very, very quickly. Whether that pool of applicants is going to still be available, especially in places like Shanghai after the experiences with the lockdown, I think is going to be a little bit more difficult. I think you're going to see quite a bit of brain drain, I think, from foreigners living in China, and then moving back over either, back to wherever they're from, or even to places like Singapore, Tokyo, Japan, and places like that. So yeah, I think the question is, I think you need to have these sort of people in place here in China, I think, now to be successful as a SME, but it's getting harder and harder to kind of find the correct people to do that.
Interesting. Jean, what kind of team do you have supporting you on the ground in China versus in the US?
I don't have anyone in China. I deal with the factory directly, and phone and virtual. So and I never have had anyone since we closed. We did have a factory that manufactured helmets, but I left that business in 2015. So since that time, the business that I've just done remotely.
Stanley, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I'll give you my situation. Pre-COVID, I had an office in Shanghai, and I had 7 people. Those 7 people, I could not run my consulting business properly. They either went back home, or I had to let them go, or they switched jobs. I don't have anybody there now. Post-COVID, when things get back to normal, I'm going to need to hire people. So I think there'll be a big hiring spree, at least for myself.
This question of resources brings me to a question that was inspired in part by a great WSCRC member, former Congressman Don Bonker. He's written about and advocated for strengthening US government support for SMEs to help them grow their exports. And part of the problem is that many SMEs don't even know that what government programs are already out there to help them. And I was curious, what are some of the programs or government offices that you all rely on or your clients rely on to do business with China and navigate business with China? Who would like to take that one first?
I will. I've used 3 resources. 2 come from the Department of Commerce. From time to time, they have visits to China where they'll invite companies or ask companies from certain vertical markets. The hot markets today in China are the EV market, aviation, oil and gas. So they'll issue a press release saying, are there SMBs out there in the US interested in visiting China? And they'll go to China for a week and you'll visit companies, potential partners, potential customers, and you'll get a pretty good feel of what your industry is like in China. They also have a gold key service. So for $950, they have representatives in, I think, 5 or 6 cities in China that will set up meetings for you, whether it's customers or even competitors, so you can find out about the market. And lastly, the Hong Kong government, they have a group called the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, and they are more than willing to see you when you're in Hong Kong and also set up meetings for Hong Kong companies. And many of them are actually Chinese companies with rep offices in Hong Kong.
Chris or Jean, would you like to add anything about what resources you all have drawn on? And I know, Jean, you don't export, or I guess neither one of you export, but are there government resources that you've benefited from?
I think, you know, for us, you know, as a local company here, it's technically a local company here in China. A lot of the government resources that we're sort of benefiting from are more on the domestic side of it. As far as our clients, you know, we always, I think it's always a good idea to kind of join a lot of these sort of business councils, as well as like Shanghai Chamber of Commerce. The Shanghai AmCham has a very large presence in Shanghai. So I think joining these sort of groups, you know, for the networking purposes, as well as any sort of resources that they can provide to, you know, their members, I think that's always a good thing to do, especially if you're considering, you know, coming into business here in China. So USCBC, all these sort of networking groups, I think, are important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the plug. Jean, what were you going to say?
You know, Washington State is arguably the most trade dependent state in the nation. And while the federal government really provides nothing to importers in terms of assistance, they really overlook the benefit to local economies. I mean, I employed, at the height of our business, I employed 16 full-time employees in 2 warehouses. I had 35 sales reps across the country, all of whom were contributing to their local economies. You know, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars every year with FedEx shipping things. So as a driver of the economy, importers and imports get short shrift from the federal government. Washington State used to provide some services to importers, and I can endorse Stanley's respect for the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. They were a resource that I referred people to many, many times importers as well as exporters from the US in my time at Washington State. So trade goes both ways, and the economic impacts of distribution shouldn't be overlooked at either the state or the federal level.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a super important point. And, you know, if you have affordable products that you're able to provide to the retailers that are your customers, then that means that those retailers' customers have more dollars to buy other companies' products as well. And that makes that money go that much further in our economy and support more companies. So totally agree with that.
And there are products that are no longer manufactured in the United States, and motorcycle helmets is a prime example. The liability and the manufacturing requirements for certain types of helmets just make it cost prohibitive to manufacture here. And we have helmet laws. People need these products. So there are cases where importers should get a little more respect.
I agree for sure. So we have another audience question. Kerr Gibbs is asking, are you expecting to get any COVID-related relief from the Chinese government? They gave some relief for SMEs back in 2020. Will they do it again? Chris?
I can answer that a little bit. I think you are going to see extended COVID relief for companies, I think, here in China coming up, especially in Shanghai. Recently in Shanghai, they mentioned that they are cutting rents for quite a few SMEs in the area for, I believe, there's a period of anywhere from like 3 to 6 months, like rent-free on that side. So I think you're going to see a big focus after the lifting of the lockdown of the government here supporting and sort of propping up business, I think, here in Shanghai.
Great, thanks. Another question came in terms of, and this is Harry Hu, in terms of US exports to China. What is your take on related US SMEs experience dealing with Chinese counter tariffs? Any pricing pressure on that front? Who would like to take that one?
I'll take a stab at it. Most of my client base are industrial companies. They're selling some sort of high tech that goes in a bigger system, whether it be a automotive, an airplane, oil and gas rig. It's a must-have. And whether it's 20% more or 40% more, the Chinese customer has to buy it. So I haven't seen too much pressure because the products that my clients are selling are must-haves. And they really can't find a second source at this point. Or if they have a second source, it takes way too much time to qualify a second source, maybe from Europe. So, and that's part of the process. When you begin to sell into China, you want to make sure that you don't have any competitors, that your products cannot be copied. So in times of tariffs, your product will continue to sell in China.
Elizabeth appears frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yeah, it does look like Elizabeth is frozen. Stanley, I had a question for you that I found your comments kind of intriguing. You're saying if you're an OEM supplier, that you as the final customer might even go to their suppliers and source product and basically warehouse them at the final manufacturers or whatever. That's true? And if so, how does the OEM supplier react to that? They're like, okay with this? You're kind of taking them out of the system in some ways.
Yeah, we are, and we're not. We're actually doing them a favor. Okay. So the OEM says component A, we have a tough time getting, and it's going to look tough for the next year. But I don't really want to pay them for a year's worth of inventory. The customer here in the US, I'll do it. To ensure I get this OEM product on time, I will go to, some secondary city, Chengdu or wherever. I'll go visit this supplier and I'll give him some money to guarantee it. So the OEM is actually quite happy with it. So I think in the long run, all parties are pretty happy with this. Yeah. Just so long as the OEM is aware of how much we're paying, how many we're ordering, and those parts are getting to the OEM. Just make everything transparent. Don't give them the perception that you're trying to go behind their back. Yeah.
And would that be are small and medium companies able to do that, or is it more bigger companies that are doing it?
It is mostly the larger companies, but SMBs are starting to do this now. When we're able to go back to China, hopefully soon, a lot of the SMBs are preparing this and having me set up meetings with all these secondary suppliers. Yeah, and at least get to know them and have somebody that we can make a phone call and push them to get these components out to the OEM. Yeah.
It's a kind of financial support for your manufacturer, that if China goes the route of tightening credit, it might be even more welcome by the OEM if it gets harder for them to borrow money.
Yeah, no, just to add on to that, our factory in Kunshan, we actually have clients that do that with us as well. The factory on our side, we do tooling, die casting, and then on top of that, we also have plastic injection, and we do like power tools. So for companies like Metabo, Stanley DeWalt, we build the power tools from them. So for them, we've seen them, given that we have enough warehousing available and everything like that, they'll come to us and be like, how much warehousing, how much space do you guys have? We want to purchase, like for example, the batteries or something like that. We want to purchase extra and then leave it in your factory to make sure that we aren't running into choke points within the manufacturing of these components during that time. So I think, like I said, I think a lot of OEMs are very willing to do this. One, when you purchase these things in bulk, obviously you're going to get a lower price comparatively to when you're buying these things, maybe 1,000 at a time. So OEMs are willing to do this to, it helps them lower their costs as well, and in turn lowers their client costs as well. Also builds, I think, that relationship between your manufacturer and then your end client as well. Kind of strengthens that tie with them as well, because it's seen as almost, it's almost like an investment.
So Elizabeth, I'll hand the floor back to you. So glad you're back.
I don't know what happened. I just shut down. So thank you for taking the baton. And I missed a little bit, but we just have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to hear each of you, what do you see as opportunities going forward? And what kind of advice would you give to other SMEs about how they can enter the market or be successful during this difficult time? Or what advice would you give to our government, whether it's the state level or the national level in the US or China, about how to improve this situation going forward, how to make sure that SMEs can continue to be successful in business with China so that we can continue to grow our economy here in the US. Would anyone who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I'll start off here. I think for SMEs, it's becoming very, very important now to, basically have someone who understands the Chinese market, has someone who can kind of guide you in building your supply chain, finding the correct and vetting the correct suppliers for you on that end. I think, beforehand, when there wasn't quite as many pricing pressures and there wasn't as, the margins were a bit higher, you could be a little more lax in, going off and finding a manufacturer that could, provide you a product at a certain price, and you could probably still make money on it. Now you're seeing a lot more, tightening pressures, not just the tariffs, the COVID situation, we're having to have more warehousing. So the margins, I think, for SMEs is becoming tighter and tighter. So it's going to be more and more important to have the correct people on your team and have the correct sort of expertise there to kind of guide you through the process, rather than, being able to kind of go out and find all this sort of stuff on your own.
Jean, I understand you had said you're sticking with China, but if you had to do it again, if you were advising an SME that's just starting out, what would you recommend?
Well, I've advised a lot of these just starting out when I was with the state of Washington, and I guess I really, even at that time in the 80s and 90s, told them what Christopher's recommending. You really need the right people on your team, and if you don't take the time to understand the market and the environment, it's very difficult to be successful. And I think if my background were not what it is, background in Chinese language and an interest in China that predates my business, I would not have, I wouldn't recommend starting out in China at this point. I think it's very difficult. It's not going to get easier for the current time. And I think there are a lot of competitive markets. And what I've said to my suppliers for years is, you hear that behind, you hear that, those footsteps, that's Vietnam, that's Indonesia, that's everyone else. Look, to eat your lunch. So yeah. It's been a great run for me, but would I do it again starting now? Probably not.
Stanley, do you have anything to add as we close up?
Sure. In general, it's never been easier than now for SMEs to get involved in China. 20, 25 years ago, it was only the large corporations. You needed a lot of money. You needed, connections, you needed a big brand name. Today, there are so many resources for you to find out how to sell to or how to outsource. You have people like Christopher in China. You can go to China today. You don't really need to know Chinese. And of course, it helps, but so many young Chinese people today speak English. It's very easy to get information. The key, though, is you have to find out what's going on in China. I tell people who don't know about China, you don't know what you don't know. And you have to go to China, see what's going on, and then you know what you don't know. Once you get at that stage, you can ask the right questions. Get to that stage where you know what to ask, and then you can accelerate your base knowledge very, very quickly. China is not necessarily for others, as Jean said. It's probably not the best place now to be making motorcycle helmets. Vietnam, Indonesia, those places are probably more cost effective. But China is still the place for very advanced products. They're moving up the food chain, where you don't just get products made there now, you get products developed there. You get the next generation of products developed now because they have such great engineers there. So things are changing. So don't be so pessimistic because you're hearing all the geopolitical stories going on. Go to China and get to a point where you know what you don't know.
That's a good positive note to end on there. Thank you, Stanley. And thank you, everybody who's joined the call, and to the Washington State China Relations Council for partnering with USCBC on this event. Thank you to Nora and Mun for helping to organize it. And to all of our panelists for taking the time out of your day to be here. Before we leave, just wanted to plug another upcoming event besides WSCRC's event next week that Nor mentioned. We have another joint event on May 10th, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, on American Northwest exports to China. Highlights from USCBC's 2022 export report. We're going to be doing that in partnership with the Mansfield Center, Northwest China Council, Business Oregon, and the U.S. Commercial Service in Seattle, Portland, and Boise. So we're going to be talking about the export data from Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Idaho. So please come for that one. You can RSVP on our websites. And we'll also, there it is. The event link is in our chat box. Thank you, Mun, for that. Thanks again, everybody, and I hope you have a great night. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Or day for Christopher.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone.